The Freedom Tradition of Concord, Massachusetts.
A land can feed us, shelter us, but can a land speak to us? The long legacy of freedom that has come from the land that lies at the confluence of two rivers, creating a third with the flowing together of its waters, somehow suggests that the land speaks and humanity responds. Known to us in recent history as Concord, a word meaning harmony, a treaty, peaceful relations, accord. This land, just west of Boston, Massachusetts, nurtured the men and women who kicked into motion the events that would form a great nation from the highest vision ever dreamed of for humanity. On this land, a spiritual awakening occurred American style, with the transcendental, mystical, expanded insights of Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau as they pondered the nature of humanity and its connection to all of creation. The peoples of the earth once responded to the call of this land to gather in its meadows, on the banks of its rivers, to trade stories and friendship. Many traveling north on the road to freedom stopped here as the Underground Railroad passed the travelers from home to home. Perhaps a land can speak. Perhaps the land has much to tell us through a resonance with our own knowing. Somehow the land and the people at this place of confluence have significantly influenced the course of human evolution towards freedom of that indomitable spirit that resolutely, day by day, realizes its true nature.
Just spent some time with Major Buttrick talking about the events of 19 April past. We still believe it is difficult in our minds to comprehend that 400 of us from different towns stood on yonder field with the one goal of defending our liberties as free Englishmen and our families.
This is the site of Concord's North Bridge. On April 19, 1775, this was a battlefield. On the west bank of the river, directly across from us, stood 450 Minutemen and militia of Massachusetts, and they were facing off against 96 British regulars who stood right over here. They were about to take part in an event that would forever change the world in which they lived. In the 19th century, there was an historian, Lemuel Shattuck, who wrote a history of the town of Concord, and he said of this event that from the plains of Concord will henceforth be dated a change in human affairs, an alteration in the balance of human power, and a new direction to the course of human improvement. The British regulars were marching to the town of Concord to seize the military supplies that were stockpiled in town. The Minutemen of Concord knew that they were coming. The alarm had been carried by Dr. Samuel Prescott, who arrived in Concord at 2 o'clock in the morning.
On the evening of the 18th of April, my wife Elizabeth and myself and the 4 children had put ourselves to bed for a quiet evening when suddenly in the morning, at approximately 2 of the clock, the alarm bell sounded from the center of town, and I was therefore summoned to grab my equipment and my 16-year-old son, John, who was in the militia, and we went to join Captain David Brown of my Minute Company, and we would join the remainder of the force in the center of town.
They knew that a British army was coming, but they did not know how many, and they did not know when they would arrive. The Minutemen of Concord had not yet heard what happened just a couple hours earlier on Lexington Green. They only heard that shots had been fired. They had no idea that people had already died that morning. The British regulars arrived in the town of Concord at 7:30 in the morning. They had been sent here to seize the military weapons and supplies that had been stockpiled in town. The Minutemen gathered on the hills to the north and west. While they were waiting there, the regulars also came down this way and crossed the river. There they divided into 2 groups. One group followed a road that used to follow the course of the river. They were on their way to the farm of Colonel James Barrett. They had intelligence that there was artillery and small arms hidden at his farm. A smaller detachment of 96 soldiers stayed close to the bridge to guard it. The Minutemen, while they waited, saw smoke rising from the town, and they feared the worst, that the town was being burned. It was not so. The regulars had found some gun carriages, put them in a pile, and burned them. But the flames leapt to the townhouse, and that also caught fire. The regulars actually helped to put the fire out, but that was not known to the Minutemen standing on the hill. This was about 9:30 in the morning. They had received reinforcements and their numbers had swelled to 450 men. At that point, Captain Isaac Davis of Acton said that he hadn't a man that was afraid to go, and they determined to form up and march down to the bridge, hoping to get back into the town to save it from burning.
But I still recall marching down that hill, and my chest was beating so hard, the beating of my heart. I thought that my breast should burst at one point as we approached those soldiers.
The 96 regulars, seeing them come and realizing that they were outnumbered 4-1, prepared to defend themselves and the bridge. The Minutemen advanced. They were under strict orders not to fire unless fired upon. For British subjects to fire upon British soldiers is treason, and nobody was anxious to do that morning.
I've never fired in anger at a fellow human being with the idea of killing him, and possibility of that gentleman facing me firing to take my life. And yet that's what occurred.
The regulars, seeing how badly outnumbered they were, began to fire without orders when the Minutemen were only 75 yards away. 2 Minutemen fell dead, Captain Isaac Davis of Acton, who was 30 years old, and Abner Hosmer, a private from Acton, who was only 16. 4 other men are wounded, and the Minutemen, realizing that they are under fire, were issued an order by Major John Butler. He said, "Fire, fellow soldiers, for God's sakes, fire." And the Minutemen responded by opening fire on the 96 British regulars standing over here. 3 of them were killed, 9 of them were wounded, and the British regulars broke and ran. Those 3 British regulars that were killed that day are buried here. Their names were Thomas Smith, Patrick Gray, and James Hall, all from the Light Infantry Company, 4th Regiment of Foot. The whole fight at the bridge lasted only 3 minutes. It was a short exchange of fire that forever changed the world.
I shall remember that for a moment, 400 men who might not otherwise come together in oneness did so on that day to stand up for ourselves. And that is what we shall take from the events at the bridge on the 19th.
Ralph Waldo Emerson immortalized the Concord Bridge fight with his hymn, the Concord Hymn, the first stanza of which says, "By the rude bridge that arched the flood, their flags to April's breeze unfurled, here once the embattled farmers stood, and fired the shot heard round the world."
It's most difficult to believe that only a day or so ago my son and I stood at the bridge, faced the British regulars in combat. Now the town of Boston has been surrounded and under siege. My son's decided he's probably going to stay and join the army that's forming. My wife would prefer that I just stay at home and take care of the family and the other 3 children. I'll have to make that decision after discussing more with her and considering the needs of both the town and the colony. But till then, I must continue my work here at the farm, look out for the wife and the children. Difficult days ahead, I must say.
In 1783, Benjamin Rush, who was a signer of the Declaration of Independence, said that the American war has ended, but the revolution continues. And it continues to this day, and we are all a part of it. So every time you vote, every time you write your congressman, or work to improve your communities, you're carrying on the revolution that began here 227 years ago, and you're adding your own meanings to the growing definition of the word liberty.
There will never be a really free and enlightened state until the state comes to recognize the individual as a higher independent power from which all its own power and authority are derived, and treats him accordingly. Henry David Thoreau, Civil Disobedience. In 1776, the Sons of Liberty flew a flag without stars called the Rebellious Stripes. The red stripes to honor the mother country, the white stripes to take a stand for liberty. In 1777, the Continental Congress adopted the 13 stripes of the Sons of Liberty flag with a union of 13 stars of white on a blue field, representing a new constellation. Later adding a star for each new state in the land of the free and the home of the brave. Be free and be brave, America.